The kingdom of Arendelle buzzed with excitement. The moment the royal announcement echoed through every valley and village, the prince was finally ready to choose his bride. In grand mansions and shimmering palaces, noble families rushed to prepare their most beautiful daughters, dressing them in silk and gold, certain that royalty could only choose royalty. Yet far away from all this glitter, in a small, forgotten village, a humble orphan named Mira quietly lived her life, unaware that destiny was already weaving her into the heart of a story bigger than she ever imagined. As the nobles rehearsed their smiles and built their pride, Mira swept dusty floors, gathered firewood, and helped elderly neighbors with a warmth that made even the coldest nights feel gentle. She had no jewels, no parents, no legacy, only a heart full of kindness and a strength shaped by hardship. Meanwhile, in the gleaming palace, Prince Rowan gazed over the kingdom from his balcony, tired of the hollow flattery and empty beauty that surrounded him. Everyone admired the prince, but no one truly saw him. They saw only the crown. Deep inside, he longed for someone genuine, someone whose worth didn't depend on wealth or appearance, but on character. The kingdom believed he would choose the most dazzling noble girl at the ball, yet Rohan himself wasn't sure if such a girl even existed. As Mira's village whispered that she should attend the royal ball, she laughed nervously, certain she didn't belong anywhere near royalty. But fate often begins with disbelief. And when a mysterious old woman appeared with a simple, elegant dress and a knowing smile, Mira's journey toward the palace quietly began. She didn't know that the prince who had everything would soon be drawn to the girl who had nothing, and that their unexpected meeting would challenge centuries of tradition, ignite jealousy among nobles, and change the future of Arendelle forever. In the quiet village of Brindlewood, morning usually began with the sound of roosters, creaking carts, and children racing barefoot down dusty paths. But on this particular day, the air felt different, charged with a strange excitement. Mira balanced a basket of firewood on her hip as she walked toward the well, her worn dress brushing against the grass. She was used to whispers following her, the orphan girl. They called her but today. The whispers spoke of something far beyond her world. As she bent down to draw water, a loud horn sounded from the hill. Everyone looked up. A royal messenger on horseback rode into the village square, his armor glinting under the sun. Villagers dropped what they were doing and gathered around, eyes wide with curiosity and awe. Mira stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching her basket, trying not to be noticed. The messenger unfurled a golden scroll, cleared his throat, and announced in a booming voice that echoed off the stone walls. By decree of His Majesty the King, Prince Rowan of Arendelle shall choose his bride at the royal ball, to be held in 1 month's time. All eligible maidens across the kingdom are invited to attend. Gasps and excited murmurs rose like a wave. Girls covered their smiles, mothers started planning dresses, and fathers imagined alliances and titles. To Mira, it all sounded like a story from someone else's life. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. A royal ball. That was a world made of silk and gold, and she had nothing but patched clothes and a pair of tired hands. She turned to walk away, unaware that at that very moment, somewhere far away in the palace, the prince she had never met was wishing for something far more real than anything that glittered. High above the same kingdom that buzzed with excitement, Prince Rowan stood on his balcony, staring at the distant mountains. To everyone else, his life seemed perfect. He had servants at his call, tutors to educate him, and the respect of nobles who bowed low whenever he entered a room. But inside, he felt trapped behind walls made of expectations. The king had told him that it was time to think of marriage, of heirs, of alliances, and power. A prince must choose wisely, his father had said. Beauty, status, and bloodlines matter. Our future depends on it. Rohan had nodded like a dutiful son, but his heart was elsewhere. He remembered the rare moments he had slipped away from the palace disguised as a simple traveler, when he had seen villagers sharing bread, helping old women cross muddy paths, laughing with nothing but a worn blanket and a small fire. Those moments had felt more alive than all the grand feasts he'd ever attended. Inside the jeweled halls, every smile shown to him felt measured. Every word weighed for advantage. No one spoke to him as Rowan the man. They spoke to him as Rowan the prince. A prize to be won. Now, with the royal ball approaching, he knew he would soon be surrounded by dozens of beautiful girls, each trained to bow, smile, and charm. He sighed, resting his hands on the rail, watching the flags flutter in the wind. Is there anyone out there who sees more than this crown? He whispered under his breath. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, in a village he did not yet know by name, a girl with no title, no gold, and no family was living a life built on kindness. Rowan didn't know it yet, but his search for something real was about to collide with her quiet world. Back in Brindlewood, life went on, even as the royal ball became the main topic of gossip. Mira moved from house to house, helping wherever she could. She patched old clothes for Mrs. Elron, carried water for Mr. Thumb, and kept the village children entertained with simple stories she made up on the spot. The villagers might not have had much, but they had long ago decided that Mira was one of their own. They remembered how she had arrived in the village as a frightened child, clutching nothing but a small wooden pendant around her neck, the last memory of the parents she could hardly recall. Over the years, she had grown into a young woman whose smile was soft but steady, someone who could make others feel seen and valued, even when she herself felt invisible. As the days passed, Mira watched girls in the village giggle and twirl in front of cracked mirrors, imagining themselves in sparkling gowns at the palace. "You should go to Mira?" one of the younger girls said one afternoon, her eyes shining. "You're much kinder than all of them. Maybe the prince wants that?" Mira laughed gently and shook her head. "Kindness won't pay for a dress or shoes," she replied. "Besides, princes choose princesses, not orphans who smell like firewood." Her words were light, but there was a quiet ache beneath them. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Mira sat by the old tree at the edge of the village, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. She wondered what it would feel like to walk into a grand hall without anyone looking at her like she didn't belong. She sighed and brushed the thought away. People like her didn't end up in castles. They watched from far, far below. One chilly morning, as mist curled low over the fields, Mira was on her way back from the forest with a bundle of firewood tied tightly with rope. Her fingers were numb, and her breath came out in little clouds. As she passed the crossroads just outside the village, she noticed someone sitting on a rock by the road, a bent old woman wrapped in a tattered cloak, clutching a small wooden cane. Her face was lined with age, and her hair was silver, but her eyes were sharp and watchful. Mira's first instinct was concern. She set down her bundle and hurried over. "Are you all right, grandmother?" she asked gently. "Do you need water or a place to rest?" The old woman looked up at her slowly, as if studying her soul rather than her face. "Most people pass me by," the woman murmured. "You stop?" Mira smiled shyly. "Everyone deserves kindness," she answered simply. The woman's lips curled into a knowing smile. From beneath her cloak, she pulled out a small bundle wrapped in linen. "The kingdom prepares for a ball," the old woman said. "A night of glitter and shallow smiles. But sometimes the brightest light comes from where no one is looking." She pressed the bundle into Mira's hands. Mira blinked, confused. I can't accept this. I have nothing to give you in return." "You have already given more than you know," the woman replied softly. "Open it when you are home." Before Mira could protest further, a cart rumbled by. When she turned back, the old woman was gone, as if the mist had swallowed her. That evening, in her tiny room, Mira carefully unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a simple but beautiful dress made of soft, pale fabric that shimmered faintly in the lamplight, not grand like a princess's gown, but more elegant than anything she had ever owned. Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time, the impossible thought didn't feel so impossible. Could she really go to the royal ball? The day of the royal ball arrived faster than anyone expected. The village crackled with nervous excitement as carts rattled down the road toward the capital, carrying young women dressed in their finest clothes. Mira stood in front of the small cracked mirror in her room, heart pounding as she slipped into the dress the old woman had given her. It fit as if it had been made just for her. She tied her hair back with a simple ribbon and put on the only piece of jewelry she owned, the wooden pendant from her parents. She had no jewels, no embroidered cloak, and her shoes were old but clean. When she stepped outside, the villagers who had watched her grow up fell silent. Mrs. Elron wiped away a tear. "Look at you," she whispered, "our Mira, all grown and shining." A few of the younger girls squealed and crowded around her. "You look like someone from a storybook," one of them exclaimed. Mira's cheeks flushed. "I'm just me," she replied softly. But inside, a fragile flame of hope had been lit. A kind neighbor offered her a seat on a cart heading toward the capital. As they traveled, Mira watched the scenery change. Fields gave way to stone roads, and small cottages became tall buildings. Her fingers tightened around her pendant as they approached the palace, its white towers piercing the sky like spears of light. Outside the gates, dozens of carriages lined up, each spilling out girls wrapped in silk and sparkling jewels. Mira stepped down from the cart, suddenly feeling very small among all the wealth and glamour. She could hear whispers already. Who is she? Which house does she belong to? Look at her dress, so plain. Mira took a deep breath, straightened her back, and walked toward the entrance. She reminded herself that kindness and courage were worth more than gold, even if no one else believed that here. Inside the palace, music floated through the air like warm honey. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing lights across marble floors, and the walls were decorated with tapestries made of threads finer than anything Mira had ever seen. She stepped carefully into the grand hall, drawn forward by the sound of laughter and violins. All around her, noble girls glided like swans, their dresses sweeping the floor in waves of color. Servers carried silver trays piled with food she didn't even know the names of. Mira moved to the edge of the room, trying not to attract attention. But in a place like this, being different was exactly what made people look. A pair of noble girls near her whispered loudly enough for her to hear. Who let her in? She looks like a servant who got lost. Another laughed. Maybe she's here to wash the dishes when the ball ends. The sting burned, but Mira kept her eyes ahead. She had spent her whole life surviving quiet insults and small humiliations. She wouldn't let this break her. She offered a shy smile to a nearby servant struggling with a heavy tray and stepped aside to make his path easier. Up on the dais, Prince Rowan watched it all. He saw the practiced smiles of the noble girls who approached him, each one introducing herself with a rehearsed curtsy and a list of her family's titles. It all blurred together until his gaze fell on Mira. She wasn't pushing through the crowd to reach him. She wasn't laughing too loudly or pretending to be someone else. She was just standing there, observing everything with wide, honest eyes, helping where she could and shrinking from the spotlight. Something about that quiet strength drew him in, like a candle in a room full of mirrors. He wondered, who is she? As the music shifted to a slower, grander tune, an announcer declared that it was time for the prince to choose his first dance. Every girl in the hall seemed to hold her breath. They adjusted their dresses, fixed their hair, and tried to make sure they were standing where the prince might see them. Mira, on the other hand, stepped back even further, toward a pillar, hoping to blend into the background. She watched as Prince Rowan descended the steps, his presence commanding yet somehow lonely. He looked over the crowd, his expression calm but searching. Nobles followed his gaze, expecting him to choose one of the most heavily adorned girls in the front row. Instead, his eyes drifted past them, to the quiet figure near the pillar. For a brief moment, Rowan and Mira's eyes met. She quickly looked away, embarrassed, certain that someone like him couldn't possibly be interested in someone like her. But Rowan felt something shift inside him. There was no calculation, no hunger for status in her gaze. Only surprise, humility, and something gentle he couldn't quite name. Ignoring the muttered suggestions of nearby advisors, he walked through the crowd. The room fell utterly silent as he stopped in front of Mira. "May I have this dance?" he asked softly. Mira's heart raced so hard she thought she might faint. She glanced around, convinced he must have meant someone else. "Me, your highness," she stammered. He smiled, and for the first time that evening, it reached his eyes. "Yes?" "You." Hands trembling, she placed her hand in his. As they moved onto the dance floor, the nobles exchanged shocked looks. Some were offended, others curious. But as they danced, Rohan asked Mira about her life, expecting a list of noble relatives and estates. Instead, she spoke quietly of her village, of helping neighbors, of growing up with no parents but with plenty of small kindnesses. "You must think it's very ordinary," she said, almost apologetically. "Ordinary," Rowan repeated, his brow furrowing. "It sounds more real than anything I hear inside these walls." Tentatively, she asked him what it was like to live in a palace. He hesitated, then chose honesty. "It's beautiful," he admitted. "But sometimes I feel like a painting on the wall. People admire me, but they don't really know me." Mira looked at him, not as a prince, but as a person who had just confessed something vulnerable. "I think being truly seen is rarer than gold," she replied. Rowan felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. Not far away, Lady Seraphina, one of the most highly regarded noble daughters, watched with narrowed eyes. She had spent weeks preparing for this ball, certain she would be chosen. She saw the simplicity of Mira's dress and scoffed. "An orphan," she whispered to her companion. "The prince is dancing with an orphan." When the dance ended, Serafina swept toward them with a practiced smile. "Your Highness," she purred, "you are kind to dance with everyone." Her gaze flicked to Mira, sharp and cutting. "Some of us have been raised our whole lives to stand beside a prince." Mira felt the intended insult but refused to shrink. She met Seraphine's eyes and answered quietly, "And some of us have been raised to stand beside anyone who needs us, prince or farmer." A few listeners nearby hid surprised smiles. Rowan looked at Mira with open admiration. Seraphine's expression hardened. In that moment she silently vowed that this nobody would not ruin her plans. The night grew late, and eventually the music soft. The king rose from his throne, and the room grew still. It was time. The moment the whole kingdom had been waiting for. Tonight, the king declared, "My son will choose the woman who will stand beside him as future Queen of Arendelle." Dozens of girls straightened their backs, their hearts pounding. Mira, suddenly nervous, slipped toward a side door. She had already lived more dream than she ever expected. A dance with the prince, a real conversation, it was enough. She had no desire to steal a crown from someone who believed they were born for it. As she tried to leave quietly, Rowan noticed her moving away. His jaw tightened. This was his decision, and he would not let her vanish back into the shadows. He stepped forward before the entire hall. "Before I choose," he said clearly, "I want to say something." Murmurs broke out among the nobles. Rowan continued, "All my life, I have been told to look at titles, beauty, and wealth. But tonight, I saw something more important. I saw kindness. I saw humility. I saw courage to stand firm without belittling others." His gaze sought Mira in the crowd. The guards at the door hesitated as she paused. "A queen should not only shine in jewels," Rowan said. "She should shine in the hearts of the people she serves." He descended the steps and walked past the most richly dressed girls, past Seraphine's incredulous stare, past rows of shocked faces. He stopped where Mira stood, trembling. "Mira of Brindlewood," he said, his voice gentle but steady, "would you accept the honor of becoming my bride?" The hall erupted in gasps. Some nobles looked outraged, others stunned. Mira shook her head slightly, tears gathering in her eyes. I'm no one, Your Highness," she whispered. "You are someone," he replied firmly. "To me, and to those whose lives you have quietly brightened." Time seemed to freeze as Mira stood there, caught between fear and a fragile hope that felt almost too big for her chest. She thought of her village, of Mrs. Elrond's gentle hands, of the children who clung to her when they were afraid, of the old woman at the crossroads who had seen something in her that she herself had never dared to believe. "If I say yes," Mira asked softly, "may I still be myself? May I still care for the people, not just the palace?" Rowan's eyes softened. "That is exactly why I chose you," he answered. "I don't need a queen made of gold. I need one made of heart." The weight of his words settled over the hall like a new law. Slowly, Mira nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then, "Yes," she whispered, "I will stand beside you." The King Gehazi, surprised but moved by the conviction in his son's choice. Some nobles grumbled, but others, especially those who had seen Mira's quiet actions throughout the night, felt something shift inside them. They bowed as Rohan took Mira's hand and led her back into the center of the hall. Not for a grand, showy dance, but simply to introduce her as his chosen bride. News of the prince's decision spread quickly across the kingdom. In Brindlewood, villagers cheered and cried, proud that one of their own, the girl they had once taken in with nothing, would now help guide the future of Arendelle. Mira did not suddenly trade her soul for a crown. She visited the villages, listened to the poor, and treated servants like friends. Over time, even the harshest nobles had to admit that the kingdom felt different, warmer, fairer, more human. And in quiet moments on the balcony, when the stars shimmered above the palace and the wind carried the distant laughter of children, Rowan would look at his wife and say, "Of all the beautiful faces in the world, I chose the one with the strongest heart." In a land obsessed with glitter and status, their story became a reminder passed from parent to child. True beauty does not demand to be seen, reveals itself in every small self-lazakchi. As the years passed, the kingdom of Arendelle slowly transformed under the gentle guidance of the queen who had once been a quiet village orphan. The palace gates, once symbols of distance and power, now opened frequently to welcome farmers, craftsmen, widows, and children, people who had long been unseen by royalty. Mira walked among them with the same humble grace she had carried since childhood, listening to their stories, remembering their names, and offering comfort where it was needed most. Her presence softened even the coldest chambers of the palace, reminding everyone that true leadership was not about towering above others, but standing beside them. Prince Rowan often watched her from across the hall, still amazed that the girl who once hid near a pillar at the royal ball had become the heart of an entire kingdom. He loved her not because she fit the mold of a perfect queen, but because she broke it with kindness and rebuilt it with compassion. And though nobles had once whispered doubts and disapproval, over time they found themselves inspired by the sincerity that flowed from her like light from a lantern in a dark room. But Mira never forgot where she came from. She returned often to Brindlewood, greeting the villagers who had raised her with warm embraces and laughter that echoed across the fields. She restored homes, funded schools, and made sure every child, no matter how poor or abandoned, felt valued and protected. Standing on the palace balcony one quiet evening, Mira looked over the kingdom glowing under the sunset and finally understood what the old woman at the crossroads had seen in her long ago. She had not been chosen because of beauty, status, or chance. She had been chosen because even in a world overflowing with glitter, her heart had refused to dim. Her journey was proof that destiny is never reserved only for the privileged. Sometimes it finds the ones who expect nothing and gives them everything, not to elevate them above others, but to let them lift others higher. And so the tale of the orphan who became a queen lived on 4 generations, whispered to children as they drifted to sleep. Among all the beautiful faces in the world, the most radiant one is the heart that chooses kindness even when no one is watching.